Welcome to IslamicDonut.com. We are jumping straight in today, right into the heart of a topic that is just so essential to the month of Ramadan. It's something that really addresses the reality of human limitation,
hmm
but with this incredible layer of divine mercy. We're going to be unpacking the concept of Fidya.
That's right. And for so many people, Ramadan is this incredible spiritual high point. But for others, maybe those facing chronic illness or just the challenges that come with getting older, the inability to fast can feel like a real spiritual burden, a heavy heart. And our sources today give us some extraordinary clarity on this. We're going to define what this religious compensation, this fidya, actually is. We'll clarify who is eligible and maybe most interestingly, look at the really practical modern ways to fulfill it. I mean, we're even talking about how digital assets, crypto, are being used to meet this ancient duty with just incredible speed.
And that's our goal for you today. We want to quickly but really thoroughly unpack the rules, the spiritual meaning, and the actual mechanics behind Fidya. The idea is to move past just a simple definition and give you those aha moments, where a complex rule suddenly becomes this beautiful, simple understanding of faith and our responsibility to each other. Okay, let's unpack this. So let's start at the absolute foundation. What exactly is Fidya? The sources define it as a mandatory religious compensation, a redemption payment. But the key here, and it's so important, is that it's for Muslims who can't fast during Ramadan for a permanent and valid health reason. That word permanent is doing all the work there, isn't it?
It absolutely is. It's the critical distinction. And the beauty of the mechanism is in its simplicity. If you can't fast, the requirement is this. You feed one poor person for every single day of fasting you miss. It's a direct one-to-one translation of a physical inability into, well, a powerful act of charity. So this substitution, it ensures that you're still attaining the spiritual rewards of the month, just through a different means.
I just find the language in the source is so powerful on this point. It
Mhm.
totally reframes the situation. I mean, you're not just excused, that word implies a loophole or something. Instead, you are fulfilling the spiritual obligation, but in a different, equally valid, maybe even more tangible way. You go from feeling this sense of, I don't know, shortcoming,
Failure.
yeah, failure, of not being physically able, to a feeling of proactive benevolence, of community outreach.
And that transformation is the whole theological insight. We have to dive into what the sources call the mercy of Allah and the principle of ease, or yusur. I mean, think about it. If someone is facing a permanent health issue, advanced Alzheimer's, severe kidney failure, extreme frailty, the pressure to fast can be immense. The desire, the spiritual desire is there, but the physical reality just isn't. They feel this deep sense of loss. They're afraid they're going to miss out on the blessings that are so specific to Ramadan.
And without this mechanism, that internal pressure, that desire to just push through the pain or the risk would still be there, and it would often be really bad for their health. But here, the faith explicitly says, no, your well-being matters. It says the intention is what counts, and the method of fulfillment can shift to what the community needs.
Precisely. The whole foundation is just so profoundly humane. It's rooted in that idea that Islam is a religion of ease, not hardship. If an obligation is going to harm you, it stops being an obligation in that form. And fidya is the solution. It transforms that physical inability, which could cause so much guilt, into a tangible act of social justice. The moment you pay your fidya, you stop being a recipient of mercy and you become a dispenser of mercy.
So it's not just swapping one activity for another. It's actually an elevation of the original intention. It's a recognition that the person wanted to do the physical act, but couldn't, so an act of charity, which is at the heart of the fast anyway, fulfills that core need.
Absolutely. And the sources are very careful here. Fidya is not a penalty. That's a completely different concept, kafara, which I'm sure we'll get to. No, fidya is described as a bridge.
A bridge.
Yes, a bridge connecting the person's sincere intention to worship with the very real, immediate needs of the hungry. By paying fidya, you're not sidestepping anything. You're fulfilling the spiritual mandate of Ramadan by addressing the very thing the fast is meant to make you feel, physical hunger.
And that brings us to what you called the beautiful exchange. Can we unpack that a little more? It feels like the philosophical heart of this whole thing.
What's fascinating here is how the sources frame this reciprocity. So imagine the individual who is permanently unable to fast. By divine decree, they are spared the danger and discomfort of that hunger. In exchange, they ensure the relief of someone else's involuntary chronic hunger. It becomes this beautiful spiritual and social transaction. The person is trading their inability to observe the ritual hunger for the actual sustenance of a starving community member.
So the spiritual benefits of Ramadan, the mercy that comes with it, that's achieved through this mechanism of charity, And it ensures the benefit of their worship flows directly to those who need it most. It turns their personal, unavoidable hardship into this widespread communal relief. It's incredible.
Exactly. It keeps the donor spiritually connected to the month, but it also prioritizes their health and upholds this social responsibility. It underscores a key teaching. Worship isn't just about physical endurance. It's just as much about intention, about following guidance, and about caring for those less fortunate. For someone with a chronic condition, Fidya allows them to participate fully in the spirit of Ramadan, even if their body can't. It's a mechanism built for human dignity.
And for you, listening, that context is everything. Fidya is not some inconvenient rule. It's a theological statement of profound compassion, showing that faith adapts to human reality.
Yeah.
So now that we've got the theological framework, we need to get into the details, the rules, because eligibility is absolutely key. The sources really stress that Fidya is only for those with permanent reasons. If the condition is temporary, you get sick, you're traveling, the obligation is usually to make up those fasts later. That's called qada.
Right, and that's a non-negotiable distinction. It's there to safeguard the sanctity of the fast. Fidya is reserved for those who have, zero hope of recovering to a state where they could safely make up the fasts. If you meet that criterion, you fit into one of three specific categories that our sources detail.
Okay, so the first one is the elderly. We're talking about seniors who've reached a point of real debilitating frailty. It's not just being old, but a physical state where fasting would genuinely harm their health or cause them extreme difficulty.
Exactly. Think about the practical reality. This might be the 80 or 90-year-old who just can't sustain themselves without food and water for 16 hours. Their health has permanently declined to a point where the fast is a genuine medical risk. So the faith steps in and removes that physical burden.
The second category is the chronically ill. This is a broader category, but it specifically covers people with permanent ailments where fasting would definitely make their condition worse or even pose a threat to their life.
And the sources get specific here with examples like severe uncontrolled diabetes that requires constant medication or advanced kidney failure.
Dialysis, things like that.
Right, or debilitating heart conditions. In those cases, trying to fast is medically dangerous. The obligation is fulfilled through charity, not through self-harm. But again, that word permanent is key. If there's a treatment that could resolve the condition within the year, then the default is to make up the fast.
And the final category is the terminally ill. People suffering from illnesses where there's no hope of recovery. Their inability to fast is absolute.
And that clarity is so important. It ensures Fidya remains a path of mercy for the most vulnerable, protecting their health and giving them peace of mind, allowing them to still engage in the spirituality of Ramadan.
But let's get into a point of nuance that I know creates a lot of confusion. What about temporary conditions related to caring for others? I'm thinking specifically about pregnant or nursing mothers. If they're afraid fasting will harm their child, where do they stand?
This is a complex area, and it's one where we have to acknowledge that there's some scholarly disagreement, which our sources touch on. The big question is whether their missed fast falls under qada, making it up later, or fidya.
So what are the main viewpoints on this?
Well, the majority opinion, especially in the Shafi'i, Maliki, and Hanbali schools, leans very heavily toward making up the fasts later. Strict qada. The argument is that pregnancy and nursing are temporary states. They're like travel or a short-term illness. The body will recover. Therefore, the physical fast must be made up day for day.
But I can hear people thinking, requiring a new mother who's already sleep-deprived and recovering to make up 30 fasts later. That can be a huge burden, right? Even more of a burden. What did the sources say about that?
That is precisely the tension. Our sources do note that the Hanafi school has a different take, often permitting just the qada without any fidya. However, some of the stricter interpretations, especially in the schools that require qada, actually mandate fidya on top of the qada fasts.
Both.
Both, but only if the mother breaks the fast solely out of fear for the child's safety, not her own. The logic is that by protecting the child, she's missing the fast for an external reason. So she has to compensate the poor with fidya, but also still make up the physical fast herself when she's able. It's a view that aims to maximize both social justice and the ritual obligation.
Okay, so that distinction is critical. If she fears for her own health, it's usually just making up the fast later. If she fears for the baby's health, the stricter view is making it up plus paying fidya. That's a vital clarification.
It is. And the key exception that flips everything back to just fidya is if her inability becomes permanent. So say she develops a chronic illness during this time, or if she simply fails to make up the fasts before the next Ramadan arrives. Then Fidya becomes applicable, often with an extra penalty for the delay. But for a healthy mother, the general expectation is to make up the days physically.
And that really sets up the final critical distinction we have to make for you, our listener, the difference between compensation and punishment, fidya versus kafara.
This is so, so vital, not just for the math, but for understanding the compassion in the law versus the consequence for willful negligence.
Right. As we've established, fidya is compensation for those who cannot fast. It's because of a valid, unchangeable health reason. It's an act of mercy.
Kafara, on the other hand, or atonement, is radically different. The sources call it a much steeper penalty. It's for someone who deliberately breaks a fast without a valid reason. This is about a willful violation of the sanctity of the fast.
And the difference in the spiritual weight and the practical demand is just astronomical.
It is. If you're permanently ill, Fidya gives you this manageable, compassionate way to fulfill the spirit of the fast by feeding the poor. If, however, someone intentionally breaks a fast with no excuse, they just decide to eat or drink, that requires kafara.
And that obligation is often, designed to be quite crushing to show how serious the breach was.
Absolutely. Kafara is a much heavier obligation. The default is often fasting for 60 continuous days for a single broken fast.
60 days.
Or, alternatively, feeding 60 needy people for that one broken fast. The sources are clear. If a fast was broken intentionally, fidya does not apply. You're in the realm of atonement, not compensation.
So fidya is for inability, kafara is for intentional violation. That's the key difference for self-assessment.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this dual system shows a really finely tuned legal structure. It recognizes human frailty and provides mercy, but it also protects the sacred nature of the obligation from deliberate transgression.
Okay, let's switch gears from the why to the how, the nuts and bolts of the payment itself. For everyone listening, this is where the concept becomes a real, quantifiable action. The big question, how much fidya do you pay? The principle is, as the sources say, beautifully simple. Feed one needy person for every missed day.
That's the principle, yes, but how you execute that can follow two paths. One reflects traditional practice from the time of the Prophet, and the other reflects modern reality. This adaptability is so key to Islamic financial law.
Let's start with method one, the staple food method. This is the traditional, historical way of doing it.
Right. Historically, fidya was measured with a prophetic volume measurement called a sa. Specifically, the requirement is half a sa of the region's staple food for each day you miss. This made sure the charity was tied directly to the local diet, providing the most basic calories that a poor person in that area would need.
I think we need to explain sa a bit more because it's not a measurement people use today. How do they physically measure this out?
That's a great point. A sa was a measure of volume, not weight. It was roughly what 4 double handfuls of grain would hold. So scholars have worked to convert that volume into a modern weight. And our sources quantify half a sa as being approximately 1.5 kilograms.
So about 3.3 pounds.
Exactly. About 3.3 pounds of the common local staple so, wheat, rice, dates, flour, whatever it may be.
So when you pay this way, you're literally giving the bulk food needed for a day. The connection between the charity and the relief is so direct.
And we can use the example from the source to make it concrete. Let's say an elderly relative misses all 30 days of Ramadan. The total would be 30 days times 1.5 kilograms.
Which comes out to 45 kilograms of rice or wheat or whatever. That's a huge amount of food. That's not just one meal. That's real lasting relief for a family.
Now, in our modern world, method 2, the monetary value method, has become the standard. It's usually what large relief organizations prefer.
And why is that? Why has the cash equivalent become so widespread and accepted?
It really all comes down to utility. While giving the food itself is perfectly valid, giving the cash equivalent is often just more beneficial for the recipient and for the charity managing it.
What makes it more beneficial?
A few things. First, cash gives charities huge logistical efficiency. They can buy in bulk at wholesale prices, so your donation goes further. Second, it allows them to cook hot, nutritious meals that are culturally appropriate, which is often more useful than a sack of dry rice, especially in a refugee camp. The goal isn't just to deliver grain, it's to alleviate hunger in the most effective way.
So it moves from a strict measurement of food to covering the actual cost of feeding someone properly.
Exactly. The requirement is that the cash has to cover the cost of 2 complete meals, lunch and dinner for one poor person for that missed day. It's about ensuring they are adequately fed.
And since that cost varies so much around the world, Our sources give a general global estimate to guide people.
Yes. They recognize that the cost of a meal in New York is very different from a meal in a famine-stricken area. So they provide a safe, actionable estimate, which usually falls between 5 to 10 US dollars per missed day. This gives donors a clear benchmark.
And if we use that upper end, $10, for a full 30-day Ramadan, the math is simple. 30 days times $10 a day is a total fidya of $300. It gives you a clear financial target.
And this is where modern organizations really streamline the process. They update their suggested donation based on real-time global food prices, making sure your money is converted into the maximum amount of relief.
So let's talk about timing. Once you know the amount, when should you actually pay it? The sources highlight a lot of flexibility, which is a mercy, but also the virtue of doing it quickly.
Right. Sharia gives you options. You can pay your fidya daily, as each day of fasting is missed. This can spread out the financial burden.
Or, and this is probably simpler for many, you can pay it as a lump sum.
Correct. The lump sum can be paid right at the beginning of Ramadan in advance for the whole month or at the end.
Yeah.
That flexibility is a huge relief.
But is there a hard deadline? Especially compared to something like Zakat al-Fitr at the end of Ramadan. Here's where it gets really interesting.
There's a preferred time and a permissible time. The ideal time is to pay before the Eid al-Fitr prayer, and the reason is purely humanitarian. It allows the poor to use those funds or that food to celebrate the holiday so everyone can share in the joy.
But the sources make a crucial distinction from Zakat al-Fitr, which has that very strict cutoff.
Yes. Unlike Zakat al-Fitr, Fidya can be paid after Ramadan. It remains a debt on you until it's paid. But, and this is the critical debt rule, if you have missed fasts from a previous year, that Fidya must be paid immediately. You have to clear that spiritual debt before the next Ramadan begins.
And why is that deadline so rigid for past obligations?
Because allowing a spiritual debt to roll over into the next Ramadan is seen as compounding the negligence. It's a debt you owe to God that is fulfilled by serving the poor, and it must be settled. The sources are clear. You should approach the new Ramadan with a clean slate from previous years.
Okay, this idea of it being a debt that extends beyond the month is fascinating. And it often becomes this collective family responsibility, which weaves into ideas of social justice. The big question is, can fidya be paid on behalf of other people?
And the answer to that is a clear, resounding yes. And this practice really reflects the communal nature of the faith, especially that intergenerational responsibility in families. We see it all the time, where younger, healthier, financially stable family members step in to help their elders.
Let's talk about the practical applications from the source, starting with paying for the living.
The most common scenario is for the living. You'll often have adult children who pay the fidya for their elderly parents who are too frail to fast and maybe don't have their own income. This isn't just a financial transaction, it's seen as an act of profound piety, of honoring one's parents. The child ensures the parent's spiritual well-being is maintained through their charity.
That makes perfect sense. The younger generation steps up to protect the older generation from spiritual worry when their physical health is declining.
Precisely. It's an extension of the duty to care for your parents in their old age.
Now, the second application is a bit more complex legally because it involves inheritance. This is payment for the deceased. If someone passes away with missed fasts, and again, these have to be fasts missed because of valid permanent illness, their heirs have a couple of options.
Right. This is where a spiritual debt becomes a tangible financial matter for the estate. If the person had outstanding fidya, their heirs have two main choices.
What's the first option?
They can pay it from the deceased's estate. This is often required if the person left instructions to do so in their will. But Islamic inheritance law is very strict about protecting the rights of the living heirs. So the payment is limited. You can only use up to 1/3 of the total inheritance for this purpose. That 1/3 has to cover any bequests, debts, and the fidya. This makes sure the primary heirs get their rightful share.
So the law balances the spiritual account of the deceased with the financial rights of the living family.
Absolutely. It maintains that fairness.
And the second option is just pure voluntary action from the family.
Exactly. The heirs can choose to pay the debt from their own personal wealth. This isn't legally required, but it's highly encouraged as an act of mercy for their loved one. It's a powerful charity on behalf of the deceased, hoping to clear any of their lingering spiritual liabilities.
So you see this obligation weaving through the family, across generations. Even when life ends, the connection to the needy is still honored.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it just shows how Fidya is a collective responsibility. It's so much more than a personal transaction. It ties generations and the whole community together through this cycle of obligation and mercy. It ensures that the most marginalized, the poor, benefit directly from the physical limitations of the old and the sick. It's a beautiful, sustainable cycle.
That collective responsibility is such a powerful idea. And now, let's look at how these ancient obligations are meeting 21st century technology. This is maybe the most dynamic part of our source material today. It shows how quickly religious charities are adopting new tools. We have to frame this around the evolution of charity itself, from, actual sacks of grain to digital assets. So why are cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum being talked about as a superior way to fulfill this ancient duty?
It all boils down to maximizing impact. It's about efficiency, transparency, and speed. When the goal is feeding hungry people, time and cost are everything. Traditional banking systems, they introduce a lot of friction.
Okay, let's start with benefit one, instant verification and speed. You have to contrast the old way with the new.
A traditional international bank transfer can take days, sometimes even a week to clear, especially if it's going to a region with a less developed banking system. And our sources highlight a heartbreaking reality. Hunger does not wait for bank clearances. When a donation is made, the need is immediate.
And this is where the blockchain just fundamentally changes the response time.
The crypto advantage is that transactions are almost instant. They often settle in minutes, no matter where the donor and the charity are located. When Fidya is sent via blockchain, the funds are verified and can be used for food programs immediately. It minimizes that delay between the donor's intention and the recipient's relief. That speed can literally save lives.
So it shifts charity from a multi-day bureaucratic process to a near real-time emergency response.
Absolutely. And the second benefit tackles a huge, chronic concern for donors: unmatched transparency.
I think every single person who has ever donated has asked that question at some point. Did my money actually get to the people who need it? Or did it get eaten up by overhead and admin costs?
It's a valid concern, and traditional currency systems can be very opaque, hiding transfers behind bank secrecy and complex accounting. The blockchain solution is radical in its integrity. It's an immutable ledger.
Can you explain immutable ledger in simple terms for someone who's not into the tech side of things?
Of course. Think of it like a digital receipt that is permanently etched onto thousands of computers at the same time. Every single transaction, from your donation to the charity receiving it, is recorded publicly and can't be altered or faked. This gives you a level of radical transparency that regular currency just can't match. It builds incredible donor trust. You can literally trace the funds to the charity's public wallet.
So that public verification provides a permanent audit trail, which aligns perfectly with the religious need for honesty in handling charitable funds.
It holds everyone accountable in a way that's decentralized and permanent. It makes it much harder for funds to be diverted.
Okay, and finally, benefit three, global reach without borders. This tackles the massive friction in international aid.
The efficiency factor here is staggering. International money transfers are notorious for exorbitant exchange fees, transfer costs, and all the bureaucratic red tape. These fees can sometimes eat up 5 to 10% of the donation.
That's money that was supposed to go to food.
Precisely. Cryptocurrency bypasses most of these high fees and the cumbersome middle layers of the banking system. The result is just much higher efficiency. More of your money goes directly to buying food, and less is wasted on bank fees or currency conversion. If the goal of Fidya is to feed the hungry, crypto provides the shortest, cheapest path from the donor to that meal.
But I'm sure some listeners are worried about volatility. If I donate $300 of Bitcoin and the price drops an hour later, doesn't that hurt the charity?
That's a critical point, and charities have a way to handle that risk. While they accept major coins like Bitcoin and Ethereum, they actively encourage the use of stablecoins.
And a stablecoin is?
A stablecoin, like USDT, is a digital asset that's pegged one-to-one to a stable currency, usually the US dollar. So by using stablecoins, the charity gets the donation knowing that the value will remain stable. Your $300 donation stays $300. It eliminates that risk and guarantees the value of the charity.
And just to list them, our sources show the infrastructure is pretty robust now.
Oh, yes. They accept the big ones like Bitcoin, BTC, and Ethereum, ETH, but also newer, faster chains with lower fees like Solana, SOL, and Tron, TRX. The level of adoption shows that the philanthropic community sees this not as a fad, but as a genuinely superior tool for fulfilling these ancient mandates.
It's a compelling case for modernization. ensuring that a profound religious duty can be fulfilled with the most efficient, transparent technology we have today. We've covered so much ground today, from ancient measurements of staple food all the way to the instant transfer of digital assets. But the core message of Fidya, it remains timeless. It is a profound spiritual mercy. It's a fulfillment of an obligation through charity that keeps your heart connected to Ramadan, even when your body can't participate in the fast.
And this obligation transforms what could be an unavoidable personal hardship into real, tangible relief for the community. It ensures that the blessing you sought through your own sacrifice is achieved by feeding the hungry. It's that beautiful exchange again. Your physical inability becomes the source of sustenance for someone else.
And that transformation, especially with the instant reach of modern technology, brings us to a final, really important thought.
This raises an important question. If we accept that technology lets aid reach people at the moment of highest urgency, literally seconds after a donation, how does that speed fundamentally change the spiritual and worldly impact of charity? Does that immediacy itself increase the weight of the donation because it meets the need at the exact moment it's most acute?
It really forces us as donors to think about how quickly we can and should respond to suffering when the tools are right there.
Indeed. And the encouragement from our sources is crystal clear. Do not delay this obligation. The sooner it is fulfilled, the sooner the hungry can eat, and the sooner the donor can find that rest, knowing their spiritual debt is cleared. It's an encouragement to embrace compassionate, timely giving.
Thank you so much for joining us for this in-depth look at the rules, the meaning, and the mechanisms behind Fidya.
We really hope this discussion has given you the clarity you need to fulfill this important religious obligation with both confidence and compassion.
Visit www.islamicdonut.com.